Welcome to day 5. You've made it to Friday of the New Testament by Pentecost Challenge. Today we read 2 short letters, Philemon and Philippians. Once thought to have been written in Rome, scholarly consensus is now that Paul wrote both these letters during an imprisonment in Ephesus in the mid-50s. There were Roman prisons and imperial guards throughout the empire, especially in the provincial capitals, so the reference to imperial guard does not necessarily mean Rome. We don't know for sure what happens next between Philemon and Onesimus, although early Christian tradition is that Onesimus eventually became Bishop of Ephesus. Philippi was the capital of ancient Macedonia in northern Greece. According to Acts 16, it was the first city in Europe where Paul founded a Christ community after leaving Asia Minor in the late 40s. Some key insights. Philemon is the only letter in the New Testament addressed to a single specific person, although you can tell it was obviously intended to be read aloud at a house church that probably met at Philemon's home. The letter is highly persuasive, some would even say manipulative. A runaway slave, a very serious offense, has become Christian, and now Paul instructs Philemon to free his new brother in Christ. Notice how the family and relational themes of our recent readings lead to specific application here. How does life in Christ change our relationships? The letter to the Philippians is the most consistently affectionate of Paul's epistles. Note that while Paul hopes to be freed at the end of Philemon, he is uncertain and may even be executed here. Yet the letter is positively joy-filled. It may well have been intended as a sort of last testimony. Many favorite passages are to be found here. Notice how the Christ crucified of 1 Corinthians is crystallized in beautiful hymn-like poetry, perhaps written by Paul, perhaps he's quoting an early Christian hymn. And note how recognition of God's act in Christ lead to changed lives, having the mind of Christ, humility, and the peace of God. The big picture here. In the canonical order, Philemon is the last of the 13 letters attributed to Paul because it's the shortest. But in chronological order, it still comes early, in the middle of these 7 letters that scholars all agree were written firsthand by Paul. Paul is a polarizing figure in our time, in large part because later writings attributed to him have verses like, "Slaves, obey your master," or "Women shall have no authority." We don't have room here to follow the full argument, but if you're interested, Marcus Borg and Dominic Cresson have a wonderful book called The First Paul that uses Philemon as a case study to demonstrate how Paul himself was what they call a radical visionary, but over time the growing church tamed his message, likely so as to better coexist in Roman society. Our struggle with challenging and accommodating culture is nothing new. I hope that your journey through the New Testament has started well for you. We do not have any readings assigned for the weekend. Saturday and Sundays are off. It's time to rest or perhaps catch up. And part of that's because as we're reading the New Testament, remember that the authors of these books all still consider themselves Jewish. And as practicing Jews, they would have observed the Sabbath, a time of rest and worship, from sundown Friday to sundown on Saturday. As the communities grew apart and we eventually became known as Christian, we moved our celebration, our worship, to the first day of the week, to Sunday. So we'll take both Saturday and Sunday off from our reading challenge and come back Monday reading 2 Corinthians. Notice that there's something that has struck me in this time of physical distancing and finding new ways to do church together. And that is that the reason we have the New Testament at all is because of letters like this. Letters that were written at a time when Paul couldn't be everywhere Paul wanted to be. Letters to build relationships and draw closer together despite physical distance. Challenge can also be opportunity. Blessings on your reading.